The day had been, up until the noon hour, one of more optimism than they had known that month. Matt was much better, well enough to come to the table that noon and to listen with interest as Jenny and Jethro told him about the progress of the farm work. Ellen's face was full of relief, and she had stopped long enough in the midst of washing, cooking, and weeding her garden to gather a bunch of lilacs from the hedge and to place them in a small stone jar at Matt's plate. Jenny and Jethro were cheerful as they made their plans for the afternoon. She, with the help of Ed Turner, would finish the planting in the field south of Walnut Hill. Jethro would go on with the planting down at John's place by himself. They ate with the hearty appetites of youth and health, and accepted with satisfaction the few quiet words of praise that Matt had for them. That praise in itself was something new. Matt had always demanded hard work from his children. It was a duty imposed upon them by necessity and by pioneer philosophy. And praise was neither given nor expected. Now the necessity was greater than ever, but a changed man imposed the labor. The older children of the family would have been surprised, and according to their several natures, pleased or outraged by their father's consideration of these two younger ones. Israel Thomas brought the letter from Hidalgo while the family still sat at the table. Jethro ran out to the road to take it, to report his father's improvement and the state of the farm work in general. Israel handed the letter over with a marked lack of enthusiasm. "Hoped I'd be bringing your pa a letter from young Tom," he said sourly. "This here is probably nothing more than some sweet talk for Jenny from the schoolmaster. Well, here 'tis. Tell her not to believe more'n half of what is written it." Jethro took the letter inside and handed it to Jenny with a big smile. It was addressed to her, of course, but that didn't matter. He settled down happily to wait his turn at reading it. There had been other letters from Shadrach since he left in February, but as if determined to obey his Matt ultimatum of no romance with 15-year-old Jenny, the young soldier had addressed himself to the entire family. Spring, however, had reached a training camp outside Philadelphia, and it was soft and gentle as the spring that had settled over southern Illinois. Perhaps some mood of defiance for his future father-in-law had welled up in the heart of a lonely boy. At all events, this was a love letter, and it was all for Jenny. When his sister left the table and ran off to her room with the letter, Jethro was irritated, but tolerant of her rights. However, when she returned with flaming cheeks and began to read a few excerpts from the closely written pages, he was dismayed. He wanted to study every line, every flourish of the beloved hand. He wanted desperately to know every word that had been traced by Shadrach's pen. Letters were so few, and on every other occasion that Jethro could remember, any letter received by one member of the family had been read and discussed by every other member. That was courtesy, common decency, whatever one wished to call it. And now came this one, as precious a letter as had ever been. And there was Jenny reading a line here and there, pausing to blush, and most obviously skip over an entire paragraph, sometimes slipping over a whole page without sharing a single word. "Tell Jeth I take great Here's an excerpt from the letter as I collect myself. "Tell Jeth I take great pride and pleasure in hearing of his study of the newspapers." Blushes and a sudden stop. Then again. "When I remember the long hours of my illness with typhoid and the loving care with which your mother watched over me, I feel that I do indeed have a mother who replaces the one I lost as a child. And this is my fervent hope, dear Jenny." It was soon evident that she was not going to read Shadrach's fervent hope aloud. And Jethro, full of hot anger toward her, was amazed that his parents were tranquil and undisturbed. They even glanced at one another and smiled a little. Jethro had no smiles. Not in his heart, or mind, or his lips. I would as soon eat something wonderful good in front of her and just offer her a crumb," he thought bitterly. He set his lips firmly together and got out of the room as soon as possible. It helped a little to have hard work facing him. He harnessed his team and rode away toward John's place without glancing back to wave goodbye to Jenny. He was in no mood to be gracious to anyone, much less to Jenny. His rage stayed with him for a while as he walked behind the horses, back and forth along the length of the field. She ain't never been selfish before, he thought, as he rehearsed Jenny's fall from his favor. Then, remembering a lesson from Ross Milton's book, which he and Jenny had been studying together when they had a little time, he tried fitting his angry thoughts into better English. She's never been selfish before, he amended. And some of his anger was dissipated before the satisfaction of his new learning. In the middle of the afternoon, Nancy came down to the field with her children and waited for Jethro in the shade of a big oak tree just inside the fence row. "We brought you a little something to lighten your work, Jeff," she said in her quiet way. She held in one hand a slice of freshly baked white bread spread with butter, and in the other a stone jug filled with cold milk. He threw the lines over a post and sat down in the shade of the tree. The children came and sat close to him. He had paid more attention to them lately, knowing that it pleased Nancy, and they had grown fond of him. "They take you for a man full growed, Che," Nancy said, smiling. "I wouldn't doubt but they sense something of John about you." He took a long, appreciative drink from the milk jug. "This is real nice, Nancy," he said, wiping his mouth and nodding to her. He was more at ease with her lately. She was beginning to seem more like one of the family. Her eyes were big in her thin face. "Has there been any letter up at your place, Jeff?" "Just one. From Shad. Nobody gets to read it except Jenny.